So it's the middle of the night. You look at your phone, you get a text message. It's your boss's boss telling you a service is down in your data center. That is the worst possible thing that could happen to any system administrator ever. So what I have in place and what I highly recommend any data center to have is an automatic notification system. And I personally love and been using Nagios monitoring notification forever. It is the best tool out there, I feel. And it lets you know in such an easy way what's down, when it's down, what's going on, and it's highly customizable. You can see if the system's down, if the service is down, system's overloaded, reach some kind of threshold. If the system is running out of disk space, there's tons of customizable features of when you might get paged or who gets paged and what time of day. So just keep watching, and I'll show you how easy it is to get started getting notified of when something happens. That's really what you need to know. So you can start troubleshooting it right away. So just keep watching.
So we're going to start out with a fully configured Nagios core server. We have two clients here, a Linux and a Windows client, as well as the local host, which is the server itself. So if you need help getting to this point, check out my other video on how to get to configure a Nagios core server. But we want to configure, in this case, what would happen if one of our services went down for our Linux client. So we're going to go ahead and start configuring our configuration files, our Nagios configuration files. So user local nagios etc has all the files we're going to configure to set up notification in Nagios. So the first file we're going to take a look at is nagios.conf. If you look here, here is the object configuration files. So if you notice, we have template and contacts as well. There's also time periods, which I'll be talking about later, which will go over what time of day you might want to be notified. So the first thing we're going to look at is how we're going to configure our contacts. But let's take a look at our template first. So taking a look at a template, it's going to show us what configuration files are genetically there, the genetic contacts. So that's really most useful. So we're going to take a look at VI contacts. And if we scroll down, we're going to take a look at what's already here. Now there's going to be the default admin contact, which we configured when you first set up the server. So when we first did that, we went in here and set up an email address, your email at domain.local.com. And this is what was the default contact that was there. Now we want to customize this. So we're going to add some additional contacts. The great thing about this is that it's very customizable. So there's many arguments you could be able to customize when you define a contact. So we're going to define contact. We're going to give it a contact name. It's kind of like an alias. It's like a shorter name. So J Smith. I usually go by first initial last name, but you can use any nickname you want. Then there's generic contacts. Now this is what's located in the templates.conf file, and we'll look at that in a second. There's alias, which I usually use the full name, John Smith, and an email address. Now, email address could be your email address or an email address to a pager, which is a very powerful thing you can do now. It makes paging cell phones extremely, extremely easy. You could also specify the pager field, which again could be just an email address to a pager number. So if you don't mind getting paged, there is, texting fees apply. Then you go ahead and specify that here, or if you just want an email address, you can just put email address, or you could put both. So once you do that, we're going to specify another contact really quickly, just so we go through and show contacts groups in a second. Next, let's quickly set up a second contact, M. Jones. Now again, the generic contacts is located in the templates file, templates.conf file, and it has a bunch of pre-configured settings that you can either specify here, and if you don't, it'll just pull this default generic settings from that file. So here we could take a look at some of the possible settings. So under J Smith, I added a bunch of settings that normally would have been pulled from generic contacts. So service notification period 24/7, that's exactly what it sounds like. And there's a time period.conf file that will have a bunch of pre-configured time periods. So if you want just workday, weekend, workday excluding holidays, you can go ahead and specify that as your time period. So there's service and host notification options, which will which is letting it know when it should contact you. If the service is unreachable, if it's critical, if it's down, if it's flopping between start and stop. So depending on how you want to be notified, you can go ahead and specify that here, and the S is to send notification, and then service and host notification commands. So you're letting it know how to send it via email in both cases. So this is a great option if you want to customize like what time of day you want to be notified, if you don't want to be bothered in the middle of the night, if you want to go to your cell phone or an email address, you can specify all that here. And again, you can specify either in your contacts.com file, or you could just use the generic contacts. So for a very quick start, you don't have to specify this. The default option is 24/7 every day of the week to notify you. So you can go ahead and use generic contacts for quick start. But if you want to customize it even more, this is how you would do it right here, which is a very powerful thing. So if you have like a rotating shift, you go ahead and change it up here and then just be notified whenever that your turn in your shift to be notified to be on call comes up. So here is the template.conf file. This is located in the same folder as contacts.conf. So here you see the name, it's generic contacts. So you take a look at the default behavior. You can change this if you want. You could add a different generic contact with a different name, and you can use that as your default setting options. So once you do that and everything in the contact is configured, let's go ahead and check your configuration. Now, if you notice here, it shows you have now 3 contacts. So the M. Jones and J. Smith have been added. Next, let's go ahead and look at contacts again. And this time we want to add a group. Okay, so we go down to the group section below. So if you notice, there's one group already created called admins, but let's create a new group. Let's say you have a Linux group and a Windows group, so different admin groups. So let's say you want to create a Linux group where only when Linux systems are down, these are the system administrators that will be notified of any possible issues. So we're going to go ahead and define contact group. You can give it a contact group name. I usually like calling it whatever OS they're responsible for, so Linux admin, Windows admin, database admin, network admin. You kind of get the idea. So depending on what the role is. So Linux admin, we give it an alias. It's usually a full name, so fully type out Linux administrators. Now, and then the members. So the members should already exist. So we created J. Smith and M. Jones. So these will be the members of our Linux admin group. The members have to exist here, otherwise you will get an error message. So make sure you create your contacts first, define your contacts, then define your contact group, and you separate it with a comma. So J. Smith, M. Jones. Now let's go ahead and check our configuration file once again with nagios -v and then the nagios.conf file, the path to nagios.conf file. This will also be in the comments. We want to make sure we do this pretty often because I like to check to make sure there's no syntax error before I get too far. It makes troubleshooting later on easier. So now we can easily see that 2 contacts group have been created. So it's the original one that was there by default, and then the Linux admin group that we just made with M. Jones and J. Smith. Again, you want to do this check pretty often before you make too many syntax changes. That way you can go back and easily change and fix your problems if this comes back with an error message. So I find that's the easiest thing to do. So now let's go ahead and take a look at our Linux client. Our Linux client has the host and a bunch of services defined. So we want to make sure we add our contact group, and we're going to add it to the host file, and this will notify us when there's any host issues. So for example, if the host goes down or if any services fail, you can get a little bit more customized and say who you want notified if a service goes down. So we can go back down through our host file, our Linux config client.conf file, and go to each of the services that are defined in this file. So you have like the file system if it's too full, how many current users, if there's some kind of limit, So in this case, it's 20 and 50. It's warning and critical. System load. So depending on what exactly fails, you can add a different contact person. So if you have someone that's in charge of like the operating system, someone else in charge of maybe Apache, um, web services, or if you're doing a database, you want your database admin to be in contact. And that's what you define in the services. So you can customize it that way, who you want to find, what contact group. In addition to that, we also enable notification for the services. So I'm enabling notification for web services and SSH. So if any of these services go down, the Linux admin group will be notified. As soon as it goes down, it usually takes a few minutes. Before a service is checked, you change the interval time of how often the service is checked. And again, I'm going to run my nagios-v.nagios.com file to make sure there's no error messages, that I did all my syntax correct in my Linux client's configuration file. Now, once I know it's correct, I can go ahead and see if my service will notify me now that I did all my configuration changes. I can go back to the web interface, see the service is currently up, but let's see what happens when it goes down. All right, so we can look at the status. Right now, HTTP web services is at warning. We will get notified for warnings as well, but I'm going to wait for it to get critical so I can show you the critical message. So you can see all the services that it's checking for the Nagios Linux client. My web services become critical. Okay, took a few minutes for the critical status to change from warning to critical as soon as it detects web services was down. And from there, it's going to take a look at my Linux client configuration file and look at who's in the contact group and notify them. And since I defined it's going to be notified by email, it's going to go ahead and send an email out either to an email address or pager. Now if we click on the notification options on the left panel, it shows us all the notifications that has been sent out. It's a log of the notifications. So we can see that the Nagios Linux client has just sent out a notification for web services because it went to critical status. So it shows the time of day, who was contacted, M. Jones, J. Smith, and how they were contacted, and then the information that they were contacted with. So they were sent a notification that this IP address at this port is no longer accessible. So at that point, hopefully the system administrator gets to fixing the issue. Also, it's fast. It's great that it notifies you so quickly. Depending on your notification interval time, that's how fast. So within a few minutes, you'll get a text message being notified that your service is now down. So then you can go ahead and start troubleshooting it. This is really the best part, is just knowing when something's down and not someone else telling you when a service is down. I wanted to include some troubleshooting in here. I found that you have to make sure certain permissions have to be set for the Nagios group. It's nothing too complicated. Once you do this, everything worked fine. I found this fixed most issues if your notifications are not being sent out. So you want to make sure that for both the Nagios command group and the Nagios group, you have the Apache user in there. So you can go ahead and add the Nagios in group and then give them permissions to some of the Nagios files. These will all be in the notes, so don't worry about catching it right here. Take a look at the notes below. You cut and paste it into your terminal and go ahead and run these commands. And again, you want to make sure that the user and group have full permission to the Nagios var read-write directory. And restart Nagios after this. We want to also double check to make sure that Apache is also in the Nagios group. We want to make sure that's there. So it has, again, the right permissions to be able to send notifications. And the last part is to disable SE Linux. So you want to go ahead and do the setenforce 0 for the current session. And then for restarts, you want to modify etc sysconfig SE Linux. And I usually change it to permission. That way it does log everything. So, and then go ahead and restart Nagios again. And this should have you guys ready to start setting out those notifications.
Thanks for watching, guys. I hope this is helpful. Definitely set up a notification system in your data center. Highly, highly recommended for any data center to get notified as soon as possible when there's an issue. And if you want to use it for free, there's Nagios XI, which is paid for, and Nagios Core, which is free. So my example is for Nagios Core, which is a completely free product. And maybe later on, I'll do a video on Nagios XI notification, which is even easier and simpler to set up. So just keep watching for my upcoming videos and subscribe to get updates.